The vast North American wilderness is home to evil forces, thought only to exist in nightmares. But the terrible creatures that roam here are all too real. And some ghosts who haunt the land are driven by a single terrifying thought.
Well, what about me?
Vengeance.
Oh, no! No! If you've been told that there's nothing there in the dark, that's not true.
Is there anybody here? Oh!
They're on the fight back to exact revenge.
Something's wrong.
Jerry! Claws ripping at me.
We gotta get out of here. They're here to do evil.
So bizarre. I've never heard anything else like this. This mountain has a very evil feel to it, and almost everyone who goes up there can tell you that.
One of the reasons that's where they feel vindicated so that they can move on.
These mountains separating the U.S. and Mexican border near San Diego are exceptionally dangerous for border security officers on the lookout for smugglers.
There's an area up on Otay Mountain, it's called the White Cross, where the Mexicans would come up every Sunday and they would, do their prayers at the White Cross.
It stood about 10 to 12 foot tall, and it had been erected there in memorial of all the people who had lost their lives trying to cross the mountain.
Patrolling this area is a treacherous task, especially at night. But agents Luis Santiago and Rocky Elmore are up for the challenge.
It's very important to work with someone you know you can trust and you can count on, because when things go bad, other help is not going to get there in time.
But tonight, Rocky isn't here, and Santiago is heading up the mountain alone.
On March 28, 1995, I was scheduled to work with Agent Santiago as his partner. Unfortunately, I've been working that area really hard for several nights. So I got overheated and I've become ill, and I had to stay home and miss my shift. The canyon is probably just about the darkest place I've ever seen in my life. Down in the bottom, there's no visibility whatsoever. You walk totally by feel of your foot. You were taking a big risk if it was dark.
Very mountainous terrain, very dangerous. Loose rocks and hazardous trails and a lot of dangerous animals out there, rattlesnakes and cougars, mountain lions.
But it's not just the animals they have to worry about. The area is apparently teeming with spirits.
Things that go up on that mountain at night that can be very scary, questionable, ghostly.
People are afraid of what they can't see. That's kind of the worst thing we can do if there is spirit activity, because that's what they feed off of.
But the biggest danger is the criminals.
That was a good place for bandits and the smugglers to come prey on their human cargo coming over.
You would occasionally encounter a smuggler with a handgun or a knife.
There's also a place where agents got shot at. And there was countless rapes and murders and robberies happening there. And some of them were very gruesome.
It's Agent Santiago's job to chase down these dangerous smugglers.
You don't know if they're armed. You don't know if they're going to fight back. Agent Santiago ran uphill toward the top of the cliffs.
Santiago's facing a desperate criminal, while his backup lies sick in bed.
And in the middle of the night, I heard arithmetic beeping inside my room. Sound kind of like a distress call. I looked at the clock and it said 12:02. I started looking for it and realized it was coming from my work radio. But when I realized that the radio was actually off and it was still beeping, I thought, well, maybe it's got a short. Turned it on and off a couple of times and that fixed the problem. The next morning, I got up feeling much better, but I had a phone call. And I was informed that Agent Santiago had gotten killed that night. An officer heard him scream and saw his flashlight tumbling down the cliff. And they estimated the time of death 2 minutes after midnight. And then it hit me. That was the time that my radio was beeping. The night of his death, investigators come out, try to surmise what had happened to him, and they came to the conclusion that he had just simply lost his balance and that it was an accident.
But Rocky and his fellow agents know better.
We all thought somebody was up there and somebody pushed him.
One of the reasons that ghosts choose to stay on this side is to seek justice. They want to find an end to something that they left unfinished.
Because usually it's someone who lived 200 or 300 years ago. Nobody alive today actually knew them. But in this case, this is somebody we had just been working with. We knew this guy.
Agent Luis Santiago is brutally murdered by a smuggler while on patrol.
When you lose someone that's a friend, you know, what are you going to do? It's tough, but we also know that's the nature of our job.
But his partner, Rocky Elmore, has a powerful sense his story isn't over yet.
The night of his funeral, I went to bed that night, probably about 10 o'clock. Again, I was woken up in the middle of the night by the same arithmetic beeping I had heard on the night of his death. I picked up my walkie-talkie and it was beeping the same fashion. And this time I turned it on and off a couple of times to try to get it to stop, and it wouldn't stop. I looked over the clock and the clock said 12:02, just like the previous time. And I felt that there was a presence on that radio that wanted me to push the talk button and say something. But I didn't have the courage to do it.
These radios don't go off by themselves. No reason his radio should have beeped.
I knew this was no coincidence, and there were shivers just going up and down my spine.
Rocky wonders if Santiago is trying to contact him about his death.
They can actually connect to people in what I call chords, where they'll actually draw energy from people.
But many believe that Santiago's ghost has a more sinister reason for stalking the area.
Everyone started to think that maybe a signal was being sent, something was being told, that he had not received justice. And he couldn't move on because something wasn't finished.
The spirit of Santiago is hunting for vengeance.
It's vindication, I think. A lot of ghosts feel like they have to seek that justice, and they choose not to leave until that happens.
Rocky Elmore's partner, Agent Luis Santiago, is murdered by a smuggler while on duty. Now his ghost haunts the land, seeking vengeance.
Well, a spirit might seek revenge on somebody if their life was taken prematurely. There's a message to be conveyed, and that was, I was murdered, and I'm crying for justice.
No nos hagas mal, por favor.
After the sighting of Agent Santiago's ghost, there was always a presence back there that, it seemed like Santiago might still be there haunting.
Every time I would see a single person crossing the border up on the mountain in these areas, I would wonder, is that a real person, or is this going to turn out to be a ghost sighting? The sightings of Agent Santiago carried on for about 7 months. And then one night in January, they came to a very abrupt and permanent end.
When the smuggler who murdered Santiago is back on the mountain, Santiago's ghost is ready to exact its revenge.
We're often asked if a spirit can kill you. And our answer is yes.
On the very same cliff that Agent Santiago fell from, a group was detected coming up with a smuggler.
No! No! Mercy!
He was on top of the cliff screaming for help.
No!
There was one dead body at the bottom of the cliff. The person killed that night was that smuggler that killed Santiago. Agent Santiago avenged his own death